Over 100 co-authors, 6 book awards, and 17 categories for bestsellers over on Amazon. My good buddy Ross Brand decided to launch a book, and boy, he did it the right way a little over a year ago. But now Ross is back for more. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the strategy that got him some of his success on his first book, and talk about how we're going to implement that in the current book that he's getting ready to launch. So you want some more insights? Make sure you stick around for today's interview with my good friend Ross Brand. You know, it's never a lack of conversation when it comes to you and I, man. I mean, have we ever had a conversation shorter than an hour or two?
I don't think so. This will probably be our shortest conversation.
Yeah, maybe when I was a guest on your show, but even then, like, you always gave me a little bit extra time on your show.
Yeah, definitely.
This is a perfect time for us to kind of segue over to your best-selling and award-winning debut book, The 100 Live Streaming and Digital Media Predictions, which was launched last year. So tell me a little bit about that creative process. Like, why did you think about doing something like this?
So what I did originally was I had predictions every year that I did on a blog post, and they were all submitted in writing. And I thought, well, I have this 5th anniversary for Livestream Universe celebration coming up, and I'm doing like this all-day live stream. Why don't I ask people predictions while they're on video? Not because I thought that it would become a book or there would be extra content, just because that's 60 or 80 fewer people I'd have to chase down over the coming weeks, right? I got them here, asked them for a prediction. And what happens is when people give you a prediction on video, as opposed to saying writing 3 to 5 sentences, 3 to 5 sentences on writing, they usually stick to that. On video, there's conversation, and these turned out to be very long predictions. On top of that, there was conversation before the predictions and after the predictions that talked about what was going on in the industry and what different people who were typically in the predictions were doing and what was new and what was old and remembering things. And I said, you know, this kind of makes a nice document for kind of tracking the last 6 years of live streaming. And at the same time, because I had all this material, once I transcribed it, I also said, you know, the blog is kind of for people in the industry, right? Industry people reading what other industry people said. Now with the pandemic, the whole world is now using live video, and digital businesses are busting out all over the place because they didn't have any foot traffic. So put all that together, I thought it was the right time to put it out in book form. And I was just surprised that I had to cut rather than add to it, although I did add a forward and an intro and chapter and other things, some resources at the end. It was actually a matter of cutting down the transcripts so that the book wouldn't be going on forever. So there was a wealth of material that I really just didn't expect or didn't plan on delving into, and I found that it was kind of interesting.
It's amazing. I always tell people their first book is going to be their worst book. If that's the case, dude, you are going to see some phenomenal success going into this second launch, which of course is happening this week. Share with me a little bit more about your second edition of 100 Live Streaming and Digital Media Predictions.
So after talking up that first book and what made that unique, this book, it's not an anniversary special or anything. This is literally soliciting 100 people and getting predictions. So it's going to be 100 new predictions that were submitted in written form. And then I always try and go a little further, right? So this time I went out and I got 30 people in addition to that 100 to offer strategy, advice, tips, things to do when you're creating or in online business. In addition to that, and then I really bulked up the resources section with, you know, my picks for everything from gear to, you know, marketing software and streaming services and all that kind of stuff. So it's not as much conversation. It's a lot less me, but it's it's bulked out in other ways. It's got added content in other ways. So, and of course, the experience of going through a launch once made this far less stressful. And honestly, I have you to thank. I mean, learning Amazon is a lot for a new person. Learning about KDP, learning about self-publishing. And first I had your videos, and I worked through some of your course, and I read a couple of your books. But really, it was working with you one-on-one, and you kind of taking me through the process of what I needed to do, and showing me and answering questions. Honestly, I don't think I could have done it without your help and had that kind of an impact out of the gate. I really wasn't expecting... I was hoping maybe I would hit number one in one obscure category for 30 seconds, take a screenshot, be able to say forever I'm a number one bestseller. But, you remember that day as the categories kept coming in, and we hit over 17 categories, and, it's been 4 book awards, and I'm shortlisted for a 5th. And I never could have done that without your help. So, I just want to thank you so much while we're here and we're chatting, because, man, that was awesome. It was really an awesome launch.
Well, I think in your defense, though, you were very much a student of the game. Like, you were like, teach me. I want to learn this. I want to learn this process. And you drank from the fire hose. So many instances where you had to kind of circle back and say, okay, what do I need to do? We'll come back to the recent book launch here, obviously, that just went out this week. So let's look at that very first one. And what do you think was the key to your success in being a bestseller for as long as you were? Because like you said, it wasn't just 30 seconds. I think you went for, a couple months at a time there?
Yeah, I mean, I think a week later or something, I was still number one in double-digit categories. And both the ebook and the paperback hit number one in multiple categories, and we hit number one in multiple countries, and was on the list. If not number one, we're on the list in UK, France, and India, and other countries. So I think the key was email. Now, I say this as somebody, I mean, it's one of the keys. I really think if I were to think it through, okay, there's keywords. Thank you for the Amazon keywords book, right? There's categories. Thank you for showing me how to get categories to Amazon, so you're requesting the categories that you want. So I think those two things were huge in giving it a chance. I think what I did differently is, rather than relying on social media, differently than what I usually do, and I've certainly built my brand and everything through social media and live streaming. And I went on live streaming shows big time. You had me on that day. I went on a few other shows that were great. I put a book launch event together, and all that helped. But I think the difference was the email side of things, which was an area that I just never really spent time in. And I put together, I had started before that rebuilding a list. I had a list of like 2,000 people that I hadn't emailed in like 5 years, 3 years, something. So I just basically started over and built the list to about 300 or 400 by the time the book came out. And also, having all the contributors, I emailed all the contributors and encouraged them to share the book, to buy the book, to review the book, and sent them graphics and swipe copy, so it would be very easy for them to get the message out, and make sure that the copy and the graphic highlighted them rather than me. So it was like, let's make this like it's really a major honor to be on, to be a part of this book. And I think that made people feel really good about it. And frankly, I was just a little surprised at how enthusiastic people were to be part of the project, even if they didn't necessarily open the email. But I think the email was key. To email people in the days leading up to it, email people in the days leading after it. That was the kind of the value add, right? We had,
Yeah.
I think we set up all the fundamentals to succeed, right? By going through your program with keywords, with KDP, with strategy of when you launch, what you launch, and how you launch, and the pricing. And I mean, we went through so many different areas that you helped me with. And of course, the categories were huge as well. And then I looked at the way that I typically market and promote things, and adding that email in was a huge differentiator as well.
Nice. So going into the launch for your book this week, what have you done differently than what you did the first time, or do you plan on staying to like the same strategy as you used before?
I'm planning on staying to a very similar strategy. Again, it's engaging the contributors, making sure that they're aware. It's emailing my list, and it's working through what I guess I kind of am calling all the fundamentals, right? That you teach from keywords to categories to your launch date, and making sure you're in the right part of KDP, right? Are you in select? Are you not? Are you are you pricing it right? Are you all these different things that the average person starting out their first or second book might not have grasped without resources such as the ones you put out, and without the help from our conversation. So I think it's a game plan that worked. I may do even less social myself this time. I may do fewer podcasts and live streams over the course of a longer stretch. I certainly will hit, that week and that day I will hit some. But I think the key is to really engage the people who are contributors, so that they're excited about it, that they buy a copy or encourage their friends and family to get a copy, and also the people on the email list and people that opt in to, hey, send me a reminder, send me a review copy, send me something to keep me involved, let me know when it comes out. They've already given you permission to email them, so email them. It works.
It's brilliant. And I like this less is more philosophy. And obviously it worked really well for you this last year. So I'm really geeked up to see how this goes in your next launch. Let's talk about the actual production of the book, because obviously 100 different people have contributed in some capacity. Wow. That's got to be like herding kittens. I mean, because you literally, and by the way, that's herding as in H-E-R-D, not H-U-R-T.
Right.
I had that conversation with somebody once. They're like, why would I want to hurt kittens? And I'm like, no, hurting kittens. It's almost impossible is what I'm trying to say. Because influencers and some of the folks, the experts that you're reaching out to, it's not like they're like, hey, I'm going to drop everything I'm doing to go ahead and give this to you. So give me a little bit of an idea. What was pre-production like, and then going into production, what was it like this time versus last time?
Okay, so the biggest difference between this time and last time was not having to transcribe 6 hours of audio. which was first pulled from the video, put up to a transcription service like Otter. I think you may have used another one too, and then cleaning all that up and cutting it so that it reads sort of more like a book, while not changing the essential meaning and words that people used, but taking out the excess. So all that was out this time. So that saved me, probably weeks, months, maybe, not having to do all that. But the essentials with people were, in the past, when I did the predictions, I always hit everybody up in their messenger or however I communicated with them. And, hey, here's the date. Sure, take an extra week, whatever. I streamlined it. I used like a type form that I used, and it had everything in it. Like, you go through it, you put your bio in, you upload your photo, you click a release, you do everything that I would need so that there was no follow-up unless I had a question, or a picture that somebody uploaded didn't work or whatever. But I did streamline the process over the last 2 years. So when I got additional contributors in the first year, And this year for both the 100 and then the additional 30, everything I needed from you could be found by when you fill out that form. There didn't need to be chasing. And I found that when you have hard deadlines, people who want to do it meet it, and you still have the option to extend it a few extra days, but you're hurting 30 people instead of 70 people or 80 people when you have pretty firm deadlines. And when you tell people this is going to be part of a book, it's also it's a level up from telling people it's going to be in a blog post. Let's just be honest, right? Give me 3 sentences, 5 sentences, a couple paragraphs for a blog post. Like, I don't know. I've been in millions of blogs. I have my own blog. When you say, hey, you're going to have your own chapter in the book if you do this, all of a sudden taking 10, 15 minutes to think up a prediction and 5 minutes to work through a form doesn't seem like that big a deal to be included in a book that you don't have to put anything else into other than being asked to share it on social once or twice when the book comes out. So it's actually a very small commitment in the long term for the people. So I feel like it's a good deal. Whenever somebody asks me for a quote or something to be part of their book, I mean, I'm always game for that, right? I would like to do it for their roundup or their blog post, but we forget, we get busy, we have to prioritize, triage all the different things coming in that we have to handle. But when somebody says a book, it's like, let me drop what I'm doing and get that quote to them, because there's that certain permanency about getting into somebody's book that's really nice.
Yeah, I totally agreed. And I know you had reached out to me to do the forward, and I was elated. I was like, yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
And a little bit of pushing and such, and you were able to kind of get that out of me. And I'm very honored to be part of your second edition. This is fantastic. No pressure. I think I followed the illustrious Jenny Q. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, she did a wonderful, wonderful first one, and then yours is just such a cool story, the way you put it together. I guess I'll leave it to people, either if you want to preview it or just leave it to people when they get the book. But it really is fun the way you brought the entire project together with something from a totally different realm, and really a wonderful story. So thank you. I really love it.
It's all about storytelling. But, what would separate you from the folks that say, pay me and I'll feature you in a best-selling book and what you're doing?
I think, first of all, I think that the value in what I'm doing is that they're getting, first of all, it's free. The amount that they need to contribute, oftentimes people are paying into a book and then they have to write, a massive paragraph, turn their IP over. They're paying, sometimes they're paying hundreds, up to $1,000. And I don't know what the return is on that, right? Unless it's just a vanity, like, let me do this and I get in a book. It's easier than writing my own. But because ebooks don't have any mandatory length, and print books don't have to be huge, like, you don't have to go 200-300 pages. If you're going to write a chapter for somebody, because I did this for somebody who asked me to do a chapter for free. And after I wrote the chapter, I said, I think I'm going to save this for something else I do. Now, if they asked me to contribute a paragraph or two of predictions or thoughts, but, when I start writing out my process for, strategically live streaming to grow an audience or a business or something, I'm thinking, I don't want to do that for free. And frankly, I don't know if I would do that if you paid me. That's for my book and my clients and my talks. And I don't want to sound selfish about it, but this, I'm asking very little in exchange for a lot of promotion that they get from me for free. And I take on all the risk. Where, and I think with the people who pay into it, there's no guarantee. They don't necessarily see a cent from it, right? They're just paying for the privilege of being in somebody's book. And I don't know. You may have a different feeling. I'm skeptical of that. I feel like it.
Yeah.
I don't charge anybody to come on my show. Now, if you want to sponsor my show, I will find a slot for you somewhere in the season to come on and talk about your product. You know, this isn't, we're not doing, hard news journalism. And believe me, the news finds ways to take care of their sponsors too, right? So does talk radio and everybody else. But that's a different story, right? But I don't do with guests. I invite you on the show because I want to learn about self-publishing. And I think the value and how I can monetize that in the long run is what I'm providing my audience. So I always think that there's this sort of, I don't know if you'd call it social compact or implicit one, whereas like you come on my show, I get to share your knowledge with my audience, which builds up my show, and then I promote something that you're doing, so you get to have a chance to sell your products and services, or at least introduce what you do to my audience, and everybody kind of leaves happy. And I think that was always the model, like when I was in sports radio. If you got an athlete who was doing, a charity thing, obviously you wanted to ask him about the coach getting fired and, his contract and what happened in the playoffs. And he's only coming on because he's in the middle of a promotional thing for his charity event. So it's an understanding. I get you on, I ask you some questions about, about your team and your coach and whatever. And then I say, tell us about the charity event you got coming up this weekend. And everybody wins, right? I get a good news interview. He gets a good promotion for his event. And I think that's a fairer way to do things.
For sure. This is amazing. I think we can go on for hours. You and I can cover a podcast really easily, but I'm going to wrap up today's podcast with the question I give all of my guests, which is, what is some advice that you could give to aspiring authors and self-publishers?
Learn a little bit about Amazon before you publish. It might be 6 months before you publish. It might be 2 weeks before you publish. I was still binging on some of Dale's videos and looking through some parts of his books that I hadn't got to, weeks before. But learn a little bit about Amazon, because your book may make money. It may become something that grows your business in the long term. But understanding how to get visible on Amazon, how to get into the right categories, use the right keywords, how to get the most out of the content that you've already created is really valuable. And even if the book doesn't make money in terms of sales over the long haul, to get that good launch, to get that recognition out there, to be able to share that across different platforms and so forth, it really helps if you have some standing on Amazon. You get in a bestseller list, you have some sales, you have some reviews. Learn that process, because it's enormous for your credibility. And even if the book doesn't make money as a product, it can be a lead-in to so many other opportunities, from speaking to clients to a second book to lots of different things. So I would say spend some time learning the fundamentals of Amazon, because let's face it, that's where the judge and jury are hanging out in terms of how your book did. And that's where you're going to be most visible, because Amazon, like it or not, is basically the third biggest search engine in the world. And you are able, with putting a focused launch together and understanding how Amazon works, you're able to really be visible in that search engine in the short term, and also have a tail that lasts, perhaps for years, if you set it up correctly and you continue to, promote it a little bit over the years. So there's a tremendous value in understanding the field that you're playing on, right? You put on the right shoes if you're playing on a muddy field versus if you're playing on AstroTurf or whatever. And I think a lot of people who come into selling a book on Amazon think of it just like, okay, this is a virtual bookstore. I put my book up, it looks nice on the shelf, the virtual shelf, and hey, sales are going to come in, people are going to notice, and it's like anything else online. You have to think a little bit in terms of search and search engines and the platform you're using and what that platform wants you to do and some of the techniques. And that's why you've been an amazing, amazing resource for so many people now.
Hey, big shout out over to Ross. Thank you so much for taking some time out your day to spend some time with us, folks. Make sure that you go ahead and visit the link inside the description down below so you can go pick up your copy of his latest book of the 100 live streaming and digital media predictions. It'll be the newer version where I actually wrote a foreword. Yes, that's right. I did the foreword for this book as well as one of the chapters. So I hope that you go ahead and pick that up. In the meantime, I will catch you next week in another interview.